I am clearly not the target audience of this book, and yet I read it and I want to share with you what my criticism is, but also what I found very helpful about this book and whether I would recommend it or not. The book I am speaking about is The Game of Desire by Shan Boody. I only have the Kindle version, so I'm holding my Kindle into the camera, which feels a bit weird because usually I have physical copies of books. Now, let me start by saying that I want to talk to you about why I read it, because I am not the person who should be reading this book, probably, or who would traditionally be expected to read this book. And I want to tell you the most helpful things that I took away from it, but also some criticism and some ideas that I did not quite vibe with. So first of all, let me explain why I am not the target audience. I'm 27 years old and I have been in a relationship for 11 years. 6 of those years were long distance. So I am in a stable relationship. I am not looking to date, and this book is directed at women who are looking to date and looking to acquire skills in dating. However, the work never ends. You know, we improve ourselves as human beings, we learn new communication skills, we learn more about the human psyche, how we can communicate effectively, how we can create intimacy effectively, and how we can forge deep connections. And that is really what I took from this book. Now, before I get too deep into that, I also want to say that this book deals a lot with becoming your true, authentic self and stepping into your authenticity, knowing what you want, knowing what you need. And that is definitely something that I like and that I look for in books, because any method or any test, she suggests a lot of tests, anything like that definitely boosts my self-confidence and makes me feel like I know myself better. That is what I also enjoyed about this book, but I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. So before I move on to the book itself, the review itself, I also want to say that I read it because Shannon Boody, Shannon Boodram, Shan Boody, whatever you want to call her, wrote this book. Shan Boody is an amazingly talented sexologist and intimacy expert, and I have enjoyed her work for a very, very long time. I think she works very, very hard. She has an immense amount of knowledge, and she finds a very effective way of communicating that knowledge to the world through her YouTube channel, through several TV shows that she was on, and also through her book now. And if I may add, she is also a fellow Aries. And since a lot of the YouTubers that I watch are fire signs, because I'm an Aries as well, it's always fascinating to see when I vibe with someone that actually it turns out that they are a fire sign. And sure enough, she's an Aries just like me. So I very much enjoy that vibe as well. And I want to set one thing clear before I continue. Now, being interested in different relationship models, being interested in fostering intimacy, in effective communication, that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with being unhappy. A lot of people think if someone who is in a relationship for 11 years and they are reading a dating book, that means they are unhappy. However, we never stop growing, you know, we never stop learning, we never stop becoming better people and becoming closer to what we perceive to be our highest selves. And that being said, there is a lot of interest on my part in the psychological aspects of what she tackles. And of course, I am someone who very much questions paradigms and questions structures, because I do identify as a chaos witch on many levels. And that means that I work with paradigms. I work by questioning structures and questioning my own beliefs. And that means that a book that tackles a subject and tries to remove a certain stigma from society definitely vibes with me. Let me explain what I mean, because I think that was a little bit abstract. So the book focuses very much on what you need, figuring out what you want, what you need from someone else, from another person, by figuring out yourself first. And while this book doesn't entirely go specifically into relationship models, I do think that it kind of pertains to it. And I am someone who does question the structures that we have in our society and the beliefs that we have about monogamy, about having to live together, about having to get married, having to have kids. And while the latter two, having to get married and having to get kids, are being questioned more and more in our society, the first two, which is monogamy and living together, are two things that do not get questioned a lot. And I think by tailoring our relationship level and our relationship status towards what we need and what our partner needs, that is something very powerful. And this book kind of pertains to that. The one half might be confused that I'm reading this because I've been in a long relationship, and the other half of you may know my other content and think she usually talks about witchcraft and about magic and about mystical stuff, so why is she talking about this? And that is kind of why I want to take this in a little bit of a witchy direction as well, and talk just a little bit about glamour witchcraft and about how that can pertain to what is described in this book. And because my content is very psycho-spiritual, you know, you can see the psychological side with this book. You can't really see the spiritual side, but we'll get into that. We'll figure it out as we go. So let's get to the review, the actual meat of this video, what I thought of the book. Now, first of all, I want to say this is not a pick-up artistry book. It's not about manipulating someone, though some of her methods are a little bit questionable, and I will get to that in about 2 or 3 minutes. But I do want to say it's not a pick-up artistry book that is purely about manipulating someone into liking you by putting on a persona or by employing methods to manipulate them. Essentially, she takes 5 women, technically 6 women, but anyways, 5 women, and takes them through her mentoring program, through her training program, to self-assess, figure out what they want, and then build up their skill set in dealing with other people, dealing with men, dealing with how they relate to the world in a new way. So in a way, they are honing in on their goals, which is kind of a relationship for some of them, but they also have a lot of business goals outside of that. And through the program, they gain a lot of self-confidence and a lot of self-knowledge that helps them in chasing their dreams and also going after the relationship that may be positive for them. What I enjoyed quite a lot is that she does not only mention a lot of social studies, a lot of social experiments, but she also tries them out with her students, with those 5 women, on a small level, which means that if she has a study, I will give an example in a minute, about something, then she sends out her women and herself to try out that study in practice. Of course, it's not really a valid way to conduct research because it is a very small sample, but it is still incredibly entertaining to read and very, very practical in that way. It's not just a book about, let me show you all of these studies about relationships and about dating and about flirting, but rather it's very practical in a way, and I appreciated that very much. So in that way, it's kind of like Sex and the City with science sprinkled in, and I can appreciate that because bringing together academia and very, very powerful storytelling is a good combination and a very entertaining combination. And her writing style also complements this very, very well because she has, on the one hand, an academic, factual writing style, but on the other hand, she has these stories, these personal stories of these women that she tells, how they grow, how she mentors them, how she trains them, and that makes for an incredibly potent combination because if you know anything about me and about my preference for books, I do tend more towards the academic direction, but I will not say no to good storytelling at all. And she really manages to do that. Shan Boody manages to merge academia with great storytelling, and the result is something incredibly entertaining and very powerful for the self-development of the reader and the women in the book. And what I like, if you know me, you know that I have an issue with people who tweak their writing style to be more relatable. You can tell they aren't authentically writing in the way they would be writing, but they are using words they wouldn't use to make it more relatable. Like OMG or BTW, and they just try to be very friendly with you, and it kind of feels forced a lot of the time. And Shan Boody doesn't do that. She has an incredibly relatable writing style, but at the same time, there's not a lot of BS in it, where you can tell that she legitimately switched her persona, switched her writing style to be incredibly relatable, to appeal to an audience that needs OMG, BTW, all of those sorts of abbreviations. And I'm not saying that it's wrong to use those. If that's your writing style, that's great. But I feel like I can very quickly pick up on whether someone's writing style actually would include those words, or whether an editor came in and told them to include them. And with Shan Boody, it's not like that at all. It is all very on point, very concise, and very entertaining without seeming like she's trying too hard. You know what I mean? Okay, time for a little bit of an interlude about the ethics of manipulation, because this is something that is a little problematic in the book for me, at least in parts. So I want to talk about pickup artistry first and foremost. If you don't know what that is, it's basically the art of manipulating people into liking you or into continuing a conversation with you. For example, one of those things that people do is negging, where you say a negative thing about someone and thus light this fire in them that they want to show you that it's not true. And, that is one of those manipulative methods that makes people continue conversation with you, even though you don't know if there's any real connection. And I do see the positive side, which is the self-improvement, which is the idea that through learning techniques of conversation, you can make yourself a more complete and more fully authentic being. By learning how to communicate effectively and interestingly, keep a conversation going that gets both parties excited and gets both parties equally on the same page and equally happy and lights people up. However, sometimes it takes forms that I cannot quite condone. If you study human interaction in order to become a better communicator, and you're interested in the science of intimacy and extend yourself and grow yourself through that, I am totally fine with it. What I'm not fine is when it gets to a manipulative level. For example, one of the studies that Shan does is that, I guess there was a study that proved that if you go to a date and for 10 minutes disagree with what the other person says, with everything, no matter what they're saying, no matter whether you actually agree, you have to disagree. And then for the next 10 minutes, you agree with everything they say, even if you technically would disagree, you still agree. That fosters a deeper connection because it makes the person think that they turned you around on a certain subject and that you're warming up to them. And I feel like this is where my line is drawn, where you are hiding yourself and hiding your own person in order to get someone to like you or get someone to be interested in you. Because essentially, you are not communicating your true opinions. You are simply sticking to the system of first disagree, then agree. And of course, if you're not looking to foster an actual deep connection and looking for a relationship, this might be okay if you're just playing around. But even then, I would question whether you should play with someone else like that, another human being. If there's any way for the parties to consent to that, if it is entirely clear to both parties that it's just a game and you're just trying things, then it may be okay, but how are you going to get someone to consent to a manipulative method? Because then they know that they're being manipulated and it's not manipulation anymore, you know what I mean? It's not forging a deep connection, it is forcing a deep connection if you do things like that, and I do not agree with that. I think at the core of it all, you have to be yourself, but also grow yourself. You can make yourself an interesting person by following your dreams, by knowing what you want in life, by being confident about who you are, and by loving yourself. Those are the things that make you you and get you to a higher level of being. And if you then carry that outwardly, I do believe that you can't really go wrong. But at the same time, you have to keep growing. So by knowing these methods of conversation and by kind of seeing where they connect to your own authentic self, you can take a lot from that book, in my opinion. I certainly did. Because I didn't take every single sentence to heart, but there were certainly parts that I enjoyed and that have helped me on my way. And that's exactly what I want to talk to you about now. I want to talk about my personal takeaways from this book. So first things first, I read this in Leo season. It is right now Leo season, which means Leos have their birthdays. And it is quite fitting because it encourages you to become playful and to become challenging to yourself and a little bit to others. And that is an attitude that I totally subscribe to because, being playful, kind of gamifying your life in order to grow yourself, I definitely like that. Challenging yourself out of your comfort zone is a very powerful thing, and this book definitely did that to me. It made me see where I am maybe a little bit behind as far as human interaction or communication skills are concerned, and where I can improve myself, and possibly also how I can improve myself. There's a lot of tests that you can take because she has this self-summary workbook that I quite enjoy, and there's a lot of tests. There's the love language test, apology language test. I think she has the Myers-Briggs test in there, which I had done previously. Then there is the Big 5 personality test and the Kinsey scale that rates your sexuality. And there is just this wealth of tests that help you get to know yourself. And of course, not everything in those tests is true. It's kind of like with astrology, where when you see your birth chart for the first time, you will realize that there is a lot of truth in there and a lot of things you can learn from, but also some things that may not resonate with you. So in the end, because we are paradoxical beings, any test or astrology or tarot and all of those tools can help us get to know ourselves better by tuning in with our authenticity and figuring out who we are and who we want to be. Now, I want to speak for a second about utilizing one's persona, one's outer image, and one's inner image in order to project something forth into the world that is appealing to others, but is also a true expression of yourself. And I would like to relate this to Glamour witchcraft, actually, and I have an article, I will link it below, and it is about the Dalai Lama. Maybe you know that recently the Dalai Lama said that if he was reincarnated as a woman, if the next Dalai Lama was a woman, she would have to be beautiful. Just what we needed. Thanks, Dalai Lama. Yeah, anyways, I don't want to get into how terrible that statement is, but the article very cleverly outlines why he has a point and how we can change his words to make sense. Because eventually what it refers to is the fact that someone, regardless of their outer beauty, regardless of how symmetrical their face is, if you know your inner light and can project that outwardly in a persona that is appealing to others, but is also a reflection of your true self, you will get your message out there. You will get a lot of attention. So in the end, the Dalai Lama does not have to be a beautiful woman. They have to be whoever they are and manage to step that up a billion times and put on that glamour in order to get their message out there, because it works, because that is what works in our society. And we can debate whether that is sad or problematic or great, but it's just a fact that someone who knows how to present themselves, and I don't mean outward beauty here, I mean having something special, something intriguing. If someone knows that, they will get more attention. And that, I feel, is something that is also in this book, that as long as you know yourself and you can confidently put yourself out there, you will get attention and get the attention of people that are helpful to you. And you'll also be able to reach your goals as an added bonus in life because you are constantly working on yourself and improving. So in the end, it's not deception. That's what this book reminded me of, because before I hated PUA, and I still hate PUA on some level, and this isn't a PUA book. I want to make that clear again, but I do see that there is a point to not deceiving others or manipulating others, but rather amp up what makes you you. And I know that a lot of the times the question that comes from people who are critical of this movement, they are like, but what if you get in a relationship and the person meets the true you and fall out of love with you? And that is exactly the problem that there is, and the problem we need to address. That is why we have to be our true selves when we start dating and when we start meeting people. And if it turns out that in the end, you get in a relationship and then you dull yourself down and you lose that shine that you had before, and that's why the person falls out of love with you, it's because you probably have the tendency when you are in a stable relationship or a stable situation to kind of let it all go and just be a number version of yourself. You start stagnating maybe, you start not caring as much about your own life because now you have a relationship after all. And that is exactly what this book incorporates, that it's not about getting a relationship. That is not the end goal. The end goal is to be the best version of you and then also probably get a relationship if you want one, but also reach your dreams. So in the end, yes, if you get in a relationship, become a dulled down version of yourself and your light kind of gets dimmed down because you are in a stable situation, then it's not like you deceived the other person. It is that you have an issue yourself of hiding yourself when you are in a stable environment, when you can just let go and not care about your life anymore. So essentially, this book is not for you if you are just looking for a relationship without self-reflection, if you want manipulative methods to kind of get yourself a relationship. That's not quite the right book for you because it does require a lot of self-reflection and a lot of work on your own person and figuring out what you need and want. Even if you're not looking for a relationship, but just something less dedicated, it is always imperative that you know yourself and that you have some sort of integrity. And that is what this book fosters. So it is for you if you are interested in dating, if you're interested in social interactions and also social studies surrounding that topic. And it is for you if you are into personal work, kind of bleeding into intimacy and into finding a partner for your life. But I would say in the end, the focus of the book is much more about self-development than it is about finding that right match for you. It's about figuring out what you want, what you need, and stepping into your authenticity, and then trying a few fun methods to get out of your shell and get out of your comfort zone. If you're a chaos witch, or if you're a witch like me who does believe a whole lot in personal power and in figuring out what works for you, who you are, and how you can apply it to the world, then this book is probably also for you. You can check out her style by looking at her YouTube channel. I will link Shan Boody's YouTube down below, and I will also link some of my own self-development videos and book reviews in case you're interested in those. And I will see you very soon. Have the greatest of days and the greatest of weeks.